The Alpha Horizon. Thinking different, acting aware.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Merler, and I'm the head of research of the Algebraists Policy and Research Forum. Today we're going to talk about the latest European Council agreement on the Next Generation EU package and what it means for Europe.
This deal has been hailed by many commentators as an historical moment for European integration. Is it true?
This is certainly a highly symbolic and historic deal for European integration because it overcomes in just one step two historical taboos of fiscal policymaking at the European level. On one hand, there has always been a long-term opposition to large-size EU common debt issuance. The European Union has the faculty to issue debt, but over the past decade, this issuance has been very marginal. Between 2010 and 2019, the European Union has issued only 70 billion in common debt, and it's now going to issue 10 times that amount, 750 billion over just 3 years going forward. And the second taboo that goes is the long-term opposition to explicit net fiscal transfers across countries, which has long been a red line for Germany and the northern countries, but transfers are going to be present in Next Generation EU.
Reaching an agreement has been difficult, taking the European Council 4 days of intense talks. What were the most controversial points of the deal, and what compromise has been found?
There were 3 controversial topics leading up to the agreement. The first item was on the composition of the overall package between loans and grants. And here the Commission had proposed 500 billion in grants. The final agreement takes the figure down to 390 billion. The second controversial topic was the governance of the instrument, where a compromise had to be found on including an emergency brake that will allow even individual countries to stop the disbursement of the funds if they were to disagree with the European Commission on their agreement about whether countries have achieved the milestones in their national spending programs. However, contrary to what was requested by the Frugal team, the emergency brake will not definitely stop the disbursement. It can only slow down the disbursement for up to 3 months. And finally, the other controversial question was on whether frugal countries were to be allowed higher rebates in the context of the EU budget. And this has actually been the case with the exception of Germany, whose rebates has remained constant.
Italy has been especially hard hit by COVID and a vocal proponent of Eurobonds since early March. Is this deal a victory for Italy?
Italy has certainly been a very vocal proponent of Eurobonds ever since the early phases of this crisis. But up until, I would say, the day when the Council reached the agreement, it was by no means to be taken for granted that this line would be taken up at the European level. So this is certainly a victory for the Italian government. Italy will benefit from 80 billion in grants under the Next Generation EU facility. And even if we don't know yet for certain how much the country will be liable to repay, because this is a question that depends on the ongoing discussions on whether EU-owned resources will be increased, even under conservative assumptions, Italy stands to benefit from about 30 billion in a net fiscal transfer. I think more than the size of the transfer, what is really important in this case is the sign of it. So the fact that Italy is the only country which is typically a net contributor in the EU budget that becomes a net beneficiary of Next Generation EU.
What do you think this deal means for European integration going forward?
As I said, this is a highly symbolic agreement for European integration, but whether it will also be a substantial one will depend on the outcome of 2 discussions that I think are still very much open. The first one is the discussion on European Union's own resources, on which there is only a very weak commitment in the Council conclusions. But for Next Generation EU to really make a substantial difference, it will have to be based on a politically solid decision to increase own resources for the European Union going forward. And the second line of discussion that is still open concerns the composition of spending. So the cuts in the grants component in Next Generation EU have focused on EU-level public goods, but it would actually be very significant if part of the common issuance under Next Generation EU were to go and finance EU-level public goods. Also because this would allow for a transition from this temporary initiative onto some form of permanent federal spending. Thank you for listening to our podcast today. This is by no means the end of the road for the European discussion on a suitable recovery strategy, so keep an eye out because we will make sure to provide you with all the relevant updates and commentary from our Algebris Policy and Research Forum.
The Alpha Horizon. Thinking different, acting aware.